Welcome back to our series, Cool Careers in Sports. This week, I'm hosting good friend of mine, Susan Forbes. With over a decade of recruiting experience, she has helped volleyball athletes find their best fit at the next level through personalized recruiting plans tailored to their goals and aspirations. Her mission is simple: create opportunities, earn offers, and help athletes build a life they love. A former Division I athlete, Susan combines firsthand recruiting experience with a master's degree in student development in higher education, a life coaching certification, and a passion for helping athletes use the recruiting process to develop skills that will serve them throughout college and beyond. She is also the #1 volleyball recruiting podcast host of the NXTVB Podcast, where she shares practical recruiting insights for athletes and families. And the reason I wanted to have her on today is because recruiting journeys are applicable across all sports and all athletes that we serve on the Fearless Warrior podcast. So, Susan, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is so fun to be on a podcast that's not my own and be the person who's getting, asked the questions.
You get to be on the other side of the mic, no pressure.
Yes.
Let's kick it off. So, I would say that 90% of our listeners are softball specific, but we have a lot of other sports that are growing. And so give us a day in the life. You are a recruiting advisor. You help athletes, especially with, I'm sure today we're going to be getting into it, of NIL and offers and what to share and where to go. I think in parents' minds, there's so many questions surrounding it. And so we could take this conversation from a career standpoint that I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you could give us a sneak peek behind. I think this career is going to be essential for a lot of athletes. So let's start with, what the heck do you do? What's a day in the life?
Sure. So what do I do? In a nutshell, I help high school volleyball players get recruited to play college volleyball. And so we do that in a lot of, different ways through just education and providing like masterclass lessons so people can kind of DIY the process, or if they want a co-pilot for the journey, someone who's got a really good sense of direction about how to, sort of make it through and help athletes figure out what's important to them. We also have like long-term one-on-one packages that we help families, in the recruiting process through those containers. And then, a few things in between, like some short-term packages or just recruiting plans. But in a nutshell, the whole job or the whole goal with any athlete that I work with is that at the end of, any time that we spent with each other, that they see the recruiting process through so that at the end of it, they have offers and opportunities that they get to choose from and don't feel like they had to just settle for the one school that maybe they got recruited to, but that they're a little bit more empowered and in the driver's seat and get to say, you know what, here's my opportunities, here's my offers. I saw it through, I did what I needed to do, and this is where I want to go.
I love that. And the reason that we connected was over the mutual mission of, you're not asking these athletes to change who they are. And so I know, Susan, I know what you stand for. And I think we're a little bit of unicorns in the space where we're not telling an athlete to change who they are. And I want you to kind of touch on that, because a lot of our conversations do revolve around the mental side of recruiting, or the mental side of their game. I think there's a lot of pressure, especially for my clients, when they know that a college coach is coming. Talk us through those conversations with your clients. What does that sound like?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this is coming up a lot in volleyball, the recruiting process right now. June 15th is going to be the first date that Division I college coaches can contact volleyball athletes who are going to be juniors. And so with that comes a lot of conversations. And so what we've been talking about is, you need to be yourself, because when you're yourself, your vibe attracts your tribe. And athletes, I think, sometimes go into the recruiting process and they're thinking that they need to be a certain somebody, or they need to play a certain way or act a certain way, or maybe be very outgoing when maybe they're not, in order to get recruited. And it's just not true. It's a little trick that our minds play on us. The reality is that whatever girl you're thinking that you need to be like or look like or play like, a good team wouldn't consist of only that one girl. And so a variety of personalities are needed on a team. Coaches are actively thinking about the different personalities on a team and how they can balance it. I think that coaches, for sure kind of know maybe personalities that they work best with, but that doesn't mean that there's only one player avatar that they can coach. I think that good coaches know how to recruit a lot of different athletes, and they might find that they work best with certain types of athletes or personality types, but that doesn't mean that they only want all that type of player on their team either. So I think something that for me that was taught to me in my life coaching certification, which I just thought was such a good point and just gave me the freedom to kind of own who I am. And especially, being I'm like doing air quotes, like the public eye, having like an Instagram following and a podcast and like sometimes being recognized where I go, like that can all feel unnerving and exposing. And sometimes it's scary to share your opinion. Sometimes it's scary to be who you are. But what someone told me was you can be, as an example, you can be the world's best peach, and some people, they just don't like peaches. And so that doesn't mean that peach sucks or that it wasn't sweet enough or is too juicy or picked at the wrong time. No, that's literally the world's best peach. And some people are going to say they're fuzzy. I don't like peaches. And so, if you kind of think about it that way of you who you are, and if you are yourself genuinely, you're going to attract the right programs and the right coaches for you versus you put on a mask, you try and act and be somebody you're not, then you're going to end up in a program and with a coach who thinks you're somebody you're not, you're going to have to keep that charade up. It's not really going to end too well, or it's going to be a lot of, take a lot of energy to keep that up. So I think that we're really big on helping athletes figure out what they want, helping them tune into what their desires are, taking action based off a desire, not fear, right? And seeing that process through so that they can find the right fit for themselves.
I love everything that you have alluded to. And the immediate thing that comes to mind is the mask quote of, I think, especially now with the transfer portal, with NIL deals. I mean, we just saw it with the Women's College World Series too, of these players who are thanking their programs of, oh my gosh, thank you for the best 2 years, or thank you for the best 4 years. And I think that the landscape is changing. And so, yeah, I think the key here is what I love what you're doing is you're teaching them that they get to have their power back. It's not just, you're not at the mercy of the recruiting process. One of the things that we're revamping inside our Fearless Warrior program is mental performance states. And so I wanted to take a moment to kind of educate a little bit about this, because not everybody performs optimally at a 10 out of 10. And so a great example of this is like a Nija Kennedy for Texas Tech. She is out of 10. She's loud. She's stomping. I think she gets a lot of flack in the softball world. So who would be like an example in the volleyball world of somebody who is very, very high energy? They're electric. Their body languages are very large. Who would that be in the volleyball space?
Gosh, I mean, I think somebody who comes to mind is an athlete that I helped, Terea Sigler. She plays in Nebraska, which is where you live. She was a freshman this last year. She got to play back row. She is who she is on the court. She's very competitive. She gets very fired up, and she is who she is. And kind of one thing that I like to tell athletes about this too is think of your most favorite college volleyball player. Who do you think is the best? And usually, that someone like that comes to mind, and it might even be someone like Terea. But I'll quickly tell them, there were coaches out there that chose not to recruit that athlete. And that's not because she's bad. It's not because she sucks. It's just because she didn't fit with their program. She didn't fit with the personality type. Like recruiting is so subjective and you can't be for everybody. And so for T, she found her fit, and I see, her on Instagram, and she seems to be really seamlessly integrating and being able to be herself, which I just love. But that, there's coaches out there too that maybe chose not to recruit her for those reasons too. And that's okay. You can't be for everybody.
Right. So on the flip side of that, the next example is one of the clients I'm working with. We use the example of a Tegan Kavan who is playing for a national championship this week at the time of the recording. So who knows? We might have to air this episode early, depending on if Tegan Kavan is a national champion, 2-time national champion. But when I think about an athlete that has more of a calm presence, that you don't have to change who they are, someone who like is stone faced, or we call it a silent assassin, where they may not be fired up as a Nija or a Jordy Ball or a Ruby Malin. And we can think of lots of anecdotes. Who's somebody in the volleyball world that would maybe be like a silent assassin?
Like stoically competitive.
Yes.
Man, I know who you're like I know who you're talking about, but I can't think of anybody specifically. I mean, if we're going to use the same team, then the setter on Nebraska. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. But she is pretty calm, pretty steady, doesn't get overly excited, doesn't get frustrated. We're gonna have to find her name and put in the show notes because I'm blanking on it. But she's, very different player, I think, than some of her teammates. And she provides that calm steadiness, for her players. And I think that's she's a setter. It's a great role to have as a setter, but there's
Is
also
it
setters
Bergen
out there.
Riley?
Yes, Bergen Riley. Thank you.
So I'm thinking of social medias, and Bergen, I think Bergen just got engaged, but she's really goofy on her social media. And I think
Is
that
she?
it's a
Yeah.
perfect example of like, be who you are and you will thrive. So the reason that
Hmm.
we're going through this example, hang with us, is we had talked about the mask, or, being the
Hmm.
world's best peach. You are basically taking these athletes through the grind and coming out on the other side without letting the recruiting process change them. And I think
Mm.
that's the biggest myth, is that all Division I volleyball players look the same, or they're a certain height, or they have the it factor. And again, like, the conversation is, what are their strengths and who are they at their optimal performance? And so if Bergen Riley needs to be at a 5 out of 10 to perform
Hmm.
well, and she needs to be a little bit more regulated, a little bit more stoic, and she knows that about herself, she's going to be way more empowered on the court and through the recruiting process.
Yeah.
Versus, I think your perfect example of Terea, or my example of Nija, is that it's going to take all different kinds. And when you can go to the conversation with these college coaches and have that confidence to sell yourself. I mean,
Hmm.
let's be real, at this point now these are contractual conversations where you have
Hmm.
to sell
Hmm.
yourself as a free
Hmm.
agent.
Hmm.
Where do you see this going? I mean, with NIL and
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the Wild West right now. I think there's, you know, volleyball athletes are getting rev share opportunities. That's for a very small percentage of volleyball athletes. Maybe the top percentage of the top kids are getting those opportunities. I think for me with the whole NIL thing, it's a huge, huge opportunity that if you're willing to create the content, if you're willing to put yourself out there and have a following, then that is not only going to potentially benefit you in your life in college, but it's also going to provide bridges and opportunities for your life after sports as well. So, I heard of an athlete who she was, creating content, ended up partnering with a jewelry company, and now she works for the jewelry company, like in her life after sports. And so for athletes, their time that they're given to develop their careers, especially at the Division I level, and get work experience and get resume experience is really, really hard to do. And it's hard to come by to get that meaningful experience. And so when you develop, your own brand, when you're partnering, with other brands, or creating content, like, you're getting experience based off of something that you're already doing that's transferable to a lot of different things that you could be doing, in your life after sports. And or you could also just leverage your following and not have to work for anybody again, and sell calls with yourself. Or maybe you end up getting a life coaching certificate, and now you have this following of people who would love to hop on a call with you. Now you have some tangible ways that you can help them, and it's a seamless bridge into life after sports. And for me, I think that's why I've been supportive of it. I don't think it's for everybody. I think it can be, really time consuming to develop your NIL and put a lot into it. But if you're willing to, and if you can do content and create things that you love, I think it can be just a really cool avenue for options, not only to make money in college, but after college too. So I don't know if that's where you're going with it, but that's where I took it.
but that fits, right?
Yeah.
That fits right into, I think, the opportunity of the whole reason we're doing this series is, if pro level or the Olympics, even the Olympians, what I've been really impressed by is this resurgence of softball in the Olympics, and wondering, like, why are we not, I think about Jenny Finch and Natasha Watley and our gold medalists. I mean, they still are getting brand
Mm.
deals. And so if we want to elevate the game, I think the message is really clear of these, what you said, bridges and opportunities. I think content and media is going to explode. And so I know this isn't our conversation for this podcast because we're keying in on your career, but let's take us through that
Yeah.
evolution. Like you've played the sport, you saw a need, and now you're filling that need. How did you get from, hey, I'm a Division I volleyball player to, man, I see a need for this. I want to make a career out of it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want the long version or the short version? Um, I'll do what I can to summarize it, but basically, I just love being in the volleyball community and ended up getting my master's degree in student development and higher education after I got a degree in sport management, thinking that I wanted to work with student athletes, like at athletic departments, there's sometimes like directors of student athlete development. And I was really, really intrigued by and interested in student athlete development and higher education because the the life of an athlete in college sports is so unique and nuanced, and it's very different, from I think what a lot of the other college students are experiencing. And so I was really intrigued by that. But when I graduated, it was not a great economy, and I was going to have to be willing to move all over the country and potentially, have my job cut out from underneath me. So I decided to apply, and I was a Division III college coach for a couple years. And then I started having babies. I have 3 boys. They're 14, 12, and 10 now. But when I started to become more of, full-time mom, I just stayed connected in the volleyball scene, the volleyball world. I was on like the board of directors for a club. I ended up, doing like coaching club, and then eventually morphed into being the recruiting director for a club. And that was mostly because people who I played with and against were all aging up and through the volleyball community. And now all these people that I know really well are college coaches. And so there was a natural connection there. And I found I was just already asking them a lot of questions about the recruiting process. And, I was working with some good kids as a coach and just like, how do you guys go about this? And what do you like when an athlete does this? And what don't you like about, the recruiting process? And so just naturally connecting with them. And then that morphed into being the director of recruiting for a club. And then I did that for a couple years. And around that time, 4 or 5 years later, it ended up being, COVID. And then that's when we saw a couple student athletes take their lives at the next level. And at the time, I was working with a life coach for weight loss, actually. And some of the stuff that she was teaching me was like blowing my mind. And I was like, wow, I didn't know I could create success and be nice to myself along the way and enjoy the process and not beat myself up versus everything else I had done in my life. Like I was successful because I held really high standards and I would beat myself up if I didn't get the goal. And that's kind of how I was used to creating success. So I was learning about this new way to create success and just feeling like really jazzed about it. And I had this aha moment when I was watching or, seeing the headlines about some of the student athletes that had taken their own lives, and like, guys, somebody needs to teach them this. Like they need to know that there's a better way to go about, the mental aspects of goal setting and getting what you want. And so I was like, you know what? I want to be the one to teach them. And so I went online, I figured out where my, life coach had been certified and decided to enroll in a certification program that was like 3 weeks away from the day I even thought about it, you know, jumped in, went all in. I went to this, program. It was a whole weekend. And I thought everybody was going to be super new to the whole concepts like I was, but come to find out there's like people have been doing this for 5 or 6 years and they already have huge businesses and they're just, kind of wanting to add another notch to their belt or get some formal training. And so it was a very like fish out of the water moment for me, but I really loved it. And I had the intention to work with college athletes as a life coach. And then I had another aha moment and I thought, you know what? The recruiting process is full of so many ups and downs, and it is such a, a challenging goal that everything I'm learning in this life coaching certification can be 100% applied to the recruiting process. And the how to for me and my work with athletes, like that's not the hardest part. It's becoming the girl who gets the goal and learning to enjoy the process and not take yourself out of the process before it's over. And so that's where I started my business. I decided to combine, my experience with these new concepts I was learning and, started my Instagram from scratch. And there was a couple people who were doing what I was doing, but I decided to take a really holistic approach with it and not just have it be about the how, but also the why and wanting to help athletes become, the girl who gets the goal and the girl who is better able to enjoy her life at the next level. And so that's kind of where all my marketing came from, was differentiating myself from what's out there. And it's it's been successful, like, which is great to say. It's not been without, some low moments for sure, and mistakes and failures, but for the most part, I really love what I do.
And you love what you do because you're not doing it to fill a gap in. Yes, of course we need an income, but I think the beautiful thing about this is that the gap wasn't I need a job. It was these girls need me and I just happen to get paid for it. And I
Yeah.
could speak to the rooftops of, we could have gone into coaching, and I thought, and if, this is career centric, Susan, I thought the only way that I could make it as a softball coach was being a head coach at a college, because you can't do it at the club level or the high school level. And I had that realization too of like, I'm going to stitch together lessons with high school coaching, with club coaching, and all three of those incomes stitched together could maybe provide for my family, but at what expense, right? Working nights and weekends. And this beautiful analogy of seeing a need, right? And going back to your conversation about the mental health side is, if nobody's providing this, the most susceptible athletes or the most susceptible population are high performers. And who are high performers? The athlete that's really, really hard on themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the higher the standards, the higher the pressure. And, if we're waiting and seeing, okay, well, they'll get mental health resources and mental performance once they get to college. What are we doing in the meantime? Who's guiding them on and we don't talk about it, right? Like, we don't talk about how dark and depressing and the comparison, the recruiting process has just gotten even darker, because now it's not just where are you going to land? It's what's her deal? What's she getting paid? Who's she partnering with? I didn't even know about rev shares.
Yep.
Which is wild.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I think that, there's definitely putting yourself out there online and creating a business and deciding to bet on yourself feels very, very exposing. And I wouldn't say it's for everybody. I mean, bet on yourself by saying, okay, I'm going to be the one to fill this need, kind of thing. But something that was told to me, which I thought was just a beautiful reframe, is think about the people who need you. If you're not willing to create that piece of content or speak to the person who could use your services, it's actually kind of selfish that you're not willing to put yourself out there when what you provide could actually really genuinely help somebody. And so I think that helped me. Like, thinking of the people who need me is why I show up every day and do what I do. And it's like, but as we both are very passionate, about what we're doing, not just about, I don't just want to get an athlete recruited. Like, I really want her to have some skills and tools that she can use in her life at the next level so that she has a better experience as a college athlete.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's speak to your experience. What is probably the piece of advice when you think about your journey of seeing a need, getting the certifications, filling that need, coaching these athletes? What would be a piece of advice if you could be a time traveler? This is a question we ask a lot on our podcast. Is like, if you could go back in time and give yourself the piece of advice you wish you would have had in your recruiting process, or even, in your experience playing, what did that version of Susan need to hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what has helped me build the business that I've had, is because I got this piece of advice, and it's, your success is inevitable as long as you don't give up. Like, as long as you don't give up, your success is inevitable. And, I think that we never, with any goal, I can't actually think of a goal. And I've tried to think of a goal where we get to know the timeline, where we get to know the date and the time in which we get to achieve that goal. Like, that's just not realistic in the goal achieving process, or starting something from scratch, or getting recruited. So we never really get to know how it's going to end up for us. But what we get to have along the way is our own back, and enjoying the process of it, and celebrating the little things that we're doing along the way. And so it's not necessarily about when it's going to happen, because we never get to know that, but how it's going to happen, and celebrating all the little things. So, like, when I first started out, I worked with a coach who was a business coach who was so good at helping me celebrate the little things. Because as athletes, we put the bar really high, and it seems very silly to give ourselves credit for the tiniest things. But she'd be like, "Oh, you posted a reel today. Like, how many people liked it?" And I'd be like, "6." And she'd be like, "6 people liked your reel? That's awesome. That means 6 people stopped to like your reel, and your following went from 100 to 150. Like, that's 50 more followers than you had the day before. Like, what did it take to make that reel?" Well, I was really embarrassed to say this, so I was really embarrassed to post it. So you were willing to feel embarrassed. You posted the reel, 6 people liked it. Like, just like this whole onion layer exercise of celebrating all the tiny little things that get you to the goal, because the reality is we're never in control of when it gets to happen, but we are in control of how we allow ourselves to feel along the way. And so I think that, as long as you don't give up and you are having your own back in what you're doing, it makes the goal achieving process like so much more fun.
And we can go back and look, your reels compared to then versus
Yeah.
now, and the podcast and everything that you're doing. We get to be beginners. We get to be
Yeah.
beginners at something. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's hard, because if you look in the lens of volleyball, or
Mm-hmm.
we look in the lens of softball, at one point when we started in our sports, we weren't that good,
Yeah.
but we don't
Yeah.
think of those things.
Totally.
So that's really, really great
Totally.
advice. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in exploring this as a career, for maybe who's, we've kind of talked about two different careers today of,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what you and I do, part of it as a byproduct of what we're offering is
Mm-hmm.
content creation, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is going to be a really fun, especially for the younger generations where it
Mm-hmm.
comes more natural.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about content creation. We've talked about recruiting support. We've talked about mindset. What piece of advice would you give to somebody who thinks, hey, this sounds like a career I could really get behind?
Well, I think like tangible advice, like my life coaching certification was the best thing that, I could have invested in, because it gave me not only the framework and tools where I can help anybody with any problem at any time, and I've just applied a lot of it to the problem of getting recruited, but it was really a growth project for myself as well, because you are always your biggest client, in life, and you're always kind of your biggest obstacle. And so learning about a lot of those tools, right, then it meant I was applying them, and they were becoming, vital, and a part of the success that I was creating. And so having some kind of, framework, I think, was just hugely beneficial for me, for the confidence, and also helping me get over myself to be able to do what I wanted to do. And then let's see, what else? What else you're saying? What's a piece of advice? Or if somebody wanted to get into this,
Yeah.
just go for it. I mean, just go for it. I was talking with a former athlete yesterday, and he's helping football athletes get recruited to play in the Ivy League. And I liked a piece of his content. He's like, "Hey, would you be willing to hop on the phone with me?" So I hopped on the phone with him, and like, he's just starting, he's just going. And, there was some things where I was talking about, I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting, because like I'm having that problem right now. So you saying that, really, really helps me, figure that out." And it's, I only know those things because I've gone before, and I've had to figure those things out. And he is figuring those things out, just simply because he's taking action. He's betting on himself. He's following his desires and going for it, and not letting his own fears and worries hold himself back. And so, you know, like, go for it. Like, your desire is there for a reason. I saw a quote once that said, your desire is like, if you have a desire to do something, that's your future self like pulling you forward towards it. And so don't ignore that. Like, it's there for a reason. It's, a calling from God, or it's something that you're passionate about. And when you do what you love, then it becomes easy. It doesn't feel like a job. And I think that's one thing that I'm really grateful for, is I get to do what I love every day. I love to work. Like, it's not something
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, I gotta hop on, hop on a phone call, or I have to create this piece of content." Like, I really genuinely enjoy all of it. And it's because I'm following that desire, and choosing to say yes to it.
And also the community. You get to stay
Hmm.
involved in the
Yeah.
community of
Yeah.
volleyball. I had that pinch me moment of like, I'm literally watching college softball, and this is my job.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
You
The
know, like, you
community
get to
is
go
the
to
best part.
tournaments, you get to pour in, you get to go
Yes.
watch your athletes. That is like the best feeling, when you get to go watch your athletes.
Hmm.
And I'm literally driving down to OKC just to watch.
Mm.
That's my job.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
what a cool life. And I'm so glad we had this conversation for our listeners too, because I think it's really hard for us to talk about the behind the scenes, because a lot of our clients and a lot of the conversations that we have on the podcast is what are mental skills, what is recruiting, what is, and I just love that this kind of gave a behind the scenes of the stuff that you're doing, and half of this stuff we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
Giving
Yeah.
each other
No,
business advice and just like running ideas by each other. So
yeah, it's entrepreneurship is so fun. I think, athletes have so many skills that they developed, on the court and just in their life as an athlete that are completely 100% transferable to entrepreneurship. You're already used to feeling uncomfortable and doing things anyways. And it's just those skills, you're just translating it into a different space and, hopefully saying yes to desire and, not doing things because you feel like you should do them, but because you want to do them and it's what you want to pursue. So I think, yeah, I'm glad I said yes to going for it and staying in the volleyball community. It's a huge part of who I am, and it's where I love to be and I love to spend time. So I'm just super thankful for it.
well, I'm super thankful for your time today. Where is the best place to follow you? Is it Instagram?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. I repost on TikTok, but I'm not this. I get kind of confused by TikTok if we're being honest.
Yeah.
I haven't really done that much, but yeah. So if you follow me at hey.susank on Instagram, you can find me there. And then I have the podcast as well. We drop weekly episodes, and that's the NXTVB podcast.
Love it. So good. Well, that's a wrap on Cool Careers in Sports for today as a recruiting advisor. And I think this has just been such a great behind the scenes. And if you guys have questions, reach out to Susan. I think that's the other cool thing, is that recruiting is translatable. So we're here to grow the sport, all female sports. And it's just been fun to hear your behind the scenes too.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.